Welcome to the Truth About Employed Physicians podcast, a weekly show where we take you behind the scenes of the professional healthcare industry and reveal the little-known methods highly successful physicians, doctors, and professionals are executing right now to maximize their income, reduce their financial liabilities, and most importantly, regain the freedom to live their lives on their terms. Subscribe to the Truth About Employed Physicians podcast today so you don't miss a single episode of this highly valuable information from our host, a veteran physician with more than 20 years in practice and counting. Now, your host, Dr. Incorporated.
Okay, hello everybody. This is Dr. Incorporated again, bringing you the next installment, an episode of The Truth About Employed Physicians. I hope it's been a good week for you. It's getting into the springtime here in the U.S. as we recorded this, and man, I love that sunshine. It feels so good to feel the sun shining on us, to begin to have the weather pop open and to get out of the snow. I live in the Midwest, and I'm glad to see all that snow melting. And it's just a good feeling. It's very refreshing. So I hope you've been able to enjoy that in your world this week as well. We're going to pick up a conversation today with John and Cheyenne. John and Cheyenne are closely related to me. My son John, you guys have seen in the show before, and this is his wife Cheyenne. And I brought them on because we're going to talk about some topics and areas that deal with not just a doctor individually, but their families too, and their spouses. And so I thought it'd really be good to get some of Cheyenne's perspectives on this as well as we talk about it. As you know, we're all tracking along in a book that I've written for young doctors, just kind of trying to create a roadmap for young doctors that make life a little bit better for you. And today's subject is going to be on the idea of the neighborhood or our housing areas that really is an important topic for medical students, residents, and then attending physicians. And so, John and Cheyenne, tell us a little bit about your journey and where you're at in training right now. Maybe Cheyenne, what you do if you work, and kind of what your housing's like right now.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a third-year medical student, going into my fourth year, and Cheyenne and I have been married for a few years now, and we met at college and got married during my first year of medical school. And Cheyenne works as an accountant currently.
Yep. I work as an accountant in downtown. We currently live in downtown South Bend here in Indiana, and so I, like he said, we met at college. So I was living at home in college, and so when we got married and moved here, we found a small apartment in downtown, and so that's kind of where we've settled at the moment.
So when you were going through that process of looking for an apartment to rent, first of all, did you consider buying as a medical student?
Not initially. We just looked for an apartment initially, but then after we knew we were going to be in our current location for a couple of years, we looked at some houses to potentially buy and live in and have as a little bit of investments, because it feels like when you're renting a lot of times like you're just throwing away that money every month and it's gone, versus a house, you do have your maintenance expenses and whatnot, but at least your mortgage is paying down into something that you're going to be able to either pay off eventually or sell and kind of cash in on those almost savings you save into your house.
So I would imagine with being married and having a spouse who's working, who's earning income, unlike the medical student who's not earning income, medical students, you know this, but that puts you in that position to even consider that as an option, right?
Right, for sure. Yeah, we were in a unique position because I kind of started a job right out of college, and we budget our money well and we save well, but so the thought was there because it was tangible, but was it still practical enough in the end to actually purchase a home versus rent for another year or two? You know?
Are you glad you made the decision to rent rather than buy?
Yeah, I think so. And a lot of that had to do with we were comfortable and settled in the apartment that we were in. And so there was also the little bit of less financial piece, but more what's practical and familiar and comfortable versus trying to uproot, change, buy a house for a year or two, and, only with the uncertainty of where we would be after that. So,
how much analysis did you go through when you tried to decide about your apartment? Were you one of those kind of people that looked at 20 places and then kind of narrowed it down and had spreadsheets and you figured it all out? Or were you kind of like somebody who went and said, looked at it once, said, yep, this is the place?
That was probably more of how it happened. I mean, I was a little bit more analytical.
Okay.
I mean, I printed out, floor plans, and I made a couple sheets that had. I'm an accountant. You have to. But I think in the end, once I kind of did some analytics, once the place presented itself, we kind of knew, okay, this is the place for us. Mm-hmm. In comparison to all of my other analytics and all the places we had been through, it was just obvious. This makes sense to us.
Just out of curiosity, was this on the higher end of your budget range, or was this on the lower end of your budget range?
The higher end.
This was on the higher end.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
But you even now in retrospect, you feel good about having chosen the higher end one?
And part of our decision making with this place is that it was one block from where she was working, and so you not having to pay for parking, you're not having to pay for those gas expenses. You actually end up saving money in that regard, as well as saving time, which is even more valuable.
Yeah.
Especially when you're counting, you have busy season where you're working 12 hours a day, not having to do that maybe a 10-minute commute that you normally have to do. Instead of having a 2-minute walk makes a really big difference during your day. And then it was about a 5-10 minute drive for me from school, and about 5 minutes from one of the hospitals, 15 minutes from the other hospital that I'm at, and so it was a good location. So we've definitely come to value location for where we live, and have come to sort of decide that we're willing to pay more in order to live somewhere that results in us not having to travel so much, not have to have such a large commute. We're willing to sacrifice some things in order to get that side of
close
things,
proximity.
because we recognize that benefit. And the few times that we've had to do some traveling to like a firm that's about an hour away for her, or other hospitals that are further away from me, for a few weeks we realized the benefit of not, how much time and how much more we were able to do with our days when we weren't having to spend that time in the car. And so to us, that's very valuable.
Were there other quality of life considerations you made when you made that decision?
I think the safety was a question.
Okay.
We looked at a few apartments that weren't technically in a safe area, even though the monthly financial burden or benefit would have been a lot better. But I think that the close proximity and also just feeling a lot safer being around people, and even also just the type of people. I was going to be starting a young professional job, and so the apartment we landed, there was a lot of young professionals in that building, versus there was a couple others we looked at that were more college students, undergrad students, or in a less safe area too. So just different demographics and stuff too. So it made me feel better that I was going to be in an area that was safe, close to work, and also near working professionals, which was what the environment I wanted to be around.
That's good. Were there any medical students in your building?
No.
So
just us.
So was that a part of your conversation? Like, I won't be around any of my peers.
We, because of the timing of how we looked for apartments, we weren't married yet when we were looking for apartments, and I didn't know any of my peers at that time, and so that wasn't really part of the decision-making process. And it probably wouldn't have changed a whole lot even if we had already known some of our peers or known some different things. We probably would have still ended up choosing the same place.
I think so
either
too.
way.
So back in the day when I was in medical school, a few years ago, I also lived in an apartment during my medical school education, and I really chose to live a very Spartan life. I've chose to live in a very old, rundown part of the community where my medical school was. Some would have considered it pretty unsafe. In fact, during my time there, I got robbed 4 times. So it probably was a little bit unsafe. But boy, economically, it made a lot of sense to me. And quite honestly, I didn't have a whole lot of possessions. I used to tell people, I had a cooking pan for eating Tony's frozen pizza. I cooked my Denny Moore stew on the stove in the can, and I had a bowl and a spoon. I think I reused those every day. not a whole lot to the existence because I was on campus. I was doing studies, and there just wasn't a whole lot. My greatest earthly possession at that time was a stereo that got stolen, but in so doing, it's always nice to have a safe place so that you can lay your head down in, that you kind of feel like is a place you can come back to and rest a little bit. And believe it or not, even though it was kind of a rough part of town, and I did get robbed a few times, I still felt pretty safe and felt okay about, getting away. You work, and so with COVID, things have changed so dramatically. Now, the separation between home and work is totally changed. How's that changed for you in terms of the accounting world?
Yeah, for sure. So I worked in the office as an accountant full-time, not working remotely at all, but obviously with COVID, I'm now working 100% remote. And that's also kind of here to stay for the foreseeable future. So I've definitely had a hard time separating that, coming home to just escape the reality of work, because I'm eating dinner at the same table that my computer's set up. And if I hear an email come in, I'm going to answer it. I don't have my computer shut down. So yeah, I would say it's definitely not quite as much of a sweet escape as it used to be.
Yeah, and you're in a one-bedroom apartment, right? So.
Yes, almost a studio. Yeah, I mean, we're in the same space, so if we're on a call at the same time, we've got to time things out, and or if I mean, it's just we got to work around a lot of different things.
But also, being at home makes you value more the fact that where you live and where you're doing your work and living at, because you're there all the time. Versus normally you're there you sleep there and you're there for like maybe 4 hours out of the rest of your day, or 5 hours or whatever. But now, especially for her, she's there 24/7 essentially, and so
definitely
having a good space is all the more valuable.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I would agree.
Has that and I know you guys are getting ready to move to another place in a city in the Midwest where the medical school is, and has that factored into your decision to your next place, how much space there is, and you're working remotely? Tell me about that.
Yes. So for example, instead of working at my kitchen table, I'd like to get a desk, right? Where we are right now, I don't have the space to even put a desk. So yeah, I mean, we definitely looked into a bigger space, and particularly a place maybe with windows, or something that was more aesthetically pleasing to someone working from home who would prefer step outside, get a fresh breath of air, or just be by window to see the sun, because you can get really locked up inside. But that was definitely part of our analysis. I did another spreadsheet of where are we going to go next.
So did that include buying a house, renting a house, or staying in an apartment? What kind of things were in that analysis?
We went through a whole big process. I'm very much on the buying a house end of things, because I don't like throwing money away, and I like the numbers, and the sooner you start saving money and putting it to work for you, the more that it ends up benefiting you in the long run. And so we looked pretty heavily at buying houses and then potentially holding them as a rental when we move on to residency, but ended up deciding that for the amount of time that we were going to be there and the other things that we wanted to do with our time, it wasn't going to make sense to do that process. And so instead we decided to rent, and we decided to rent an apartment rather than a house, because you also could still rent a house, right? We decided to rent an apartment because of the location that it's in. It's closer to a lot of our friends and other medical students,
and both the hospitals and
the hospitals, and where her new work location will be.
Did you have to pay more because of all those positives?
It'll end up being a little bit more. It's also a bigger city, so the cost of living is always going to be a little bit more, but it's probably proportionally about the same as we're paying right now once you factor all the different things in. But we did an apartment rather than the house just because of the upkeeping stuff that we're not going to have to do. You don't have to worry about mowing the yard. You don't have to worry about shoveling the driveway or the sidewalk and things like that.
Taxes, insurance,
all those different things.
And we don't want to.
If we're going to do all that, you might as well buy the house.
Yeah, and we're not quite ready to, have roots yet, because we're not sure where the next year is going to lead us. So to, invest in a full house, either renting or buying, it just seemed like a lot bigger of an investment. when within 1 year we may be taking the step to leave,
But we're pretty set on buying a place when we move to residency.
Well, because we know we'll be there for 5+ years.
Because you want to do orthopedics.
Yeah, because I want to do orthopedics. It's a 5-year program. We're currently thinking we would probably rent someplace for the first 6 months while we get to know the area and what. It's hard to know a city very well until you've lived there for a while, and so we don't feel like we need to rush. But we want to get to know the area, and then we'll be looking for a house to buy. And also, if we end up in a really big city where it's not feasible as a resident to buy something because of your income, then we probably would end up renting. But we're looking for a little bit smaller city where that's more feasible, and we're going to be looking at locations and homes that are close to our places of work so that we can take advantage of not losing time every day commuting and whatnot. So
I think for some of you who are in residency, as our viewers, you might recognize, depends on the length of your residency, whether or not the buying versus renting thing really plays out. That the break point is typically 5 years is sort of a 50-50 proposition, depending on the arbitrage of the community that you're going to live in, like you said.
And your down payment.
And your down payment, how much you have to put down for down payment. Having a full-time working spouse definitely makes a bit of a difference that way. But if you're in a 3-year residency, boy, it's pretty tough, frankly, to make the economics work in such a way that even though you want to buy a house, you don't want to get that money away anymore. You just almost have to sort of bite the bullet and not do it unless, again, you can make a big down payment or have enough income coming in to make extra payments to make it work.
Sure.
And so it's nice to hear you guys are already thinking through that process. Just out of curiosity, too, you think you'll buy a house? Do you think you'll buy a duplex, a triplex, a quad? What are you thinking about with all that?
Well, yeah, we've gone back and forth because obviously doing, a duplex we've really talked, we've gotten into real estate, the real estate mind. We would love to find a place where, we live on a piece of the building, and then we rent out either retail space or either rent out the other room or the other space on the other side of either the duplex or whatever building it is. So we have definitely had those thoughts, but then there's also that little parcel of just wanting your own space and trying to settle down without strings attached.
Yeah. But it's nice if you do the quad, or I think the quad is the way to go, living in one and running out the other 3, because then those other people are subsidizing all of the expenses that go with living in that place. It's going to cost more to buy it on the front end, but they're basically paying for you to live there. They're paying your mortgage. They're doing all that. And then when you move out, that amount that you might have been paying towards things, you're going to rent your space out, and now you've got that income, and you've got a nice chunk of savings that you've been able to build over time. And so I'd say I'm a little bit of a stronger leaning towards buying a multifamily property as an investment, and she probably is more of a stronger, or not stronger, but should be happier or just as happy, I would say, with a just regular single family home. Or
I think more for me the factor is this duplex or quad in a safe area, because a lot of times a lot of duplexes or quads are in areas that are still up and coming or trying to be renovated, and so I think as long as I could feel comfortable in the area, I would be more open to it, because then I would know who are we renting to, are they going to follow through, who are we around. That's really more of my holdback. But as far as the concept, it kind of pays itself, which is really a nice benefit.
You bring forward an important subject, though, when it comes to choosing your house and your neighborhood, because the good life that we're all wanting to pursue in medicine, and that ultimately me as an attending physician have, is to set down roots and to build a sense of community around you. And the community around you and where you live definitely influences your sense of well-being. It influences your sense of feeling rooted, feeling connected. And if you sort of buy a quad in the middle of a bad section of town, but it's a great deal, your sense of building community is going to be way diminished, because you're just kind of living there, as opposed to being able to get a little more immersed in the community, where you might feel comfortable walking down to the local store on your own, or taking your dog for a walk if you have children, going to the park nearby, are all those elements that begin to play into that sense of belonging to a community, right? Like that's a big thing. I think when you're a medical student, you sort of are willing to pass on that. You recognize, right, that you're like, well, might have some friends from school, but we're not going to have lots of friends. Have you guys felt that in your journey? Like, you're like, well...
Yeah, I think with medical school, I think you kind of learn it through college, or if you didn't go to college, even in high school. I mean, friends can be transient, they come and go. And so I think when you have 3-4 years of this medical school process, and that group you're with, however small or big it is, are going to be all across the country. And then you're going to have this new smaller group in residency, and then even after that, who's to say that those few people in the residency program are going to stay right there. So I think you kind of have to go in it with the idea that you want to try and build connection, relationship with those current and present people, but that there is that high chance that it filters out the further you go.
Yeah. It's definitely, I think, important. It's a long process getting through your medical training, and it's a long process to go through a series of channels in which you don't feel engaged with a community of people. You have your marriage, you have relationships, and you have some of those, what I call relationships by convenience. Okay, they're the people that you're with, and sometimes you might have a person, a couple or two that sort of you do really connect with, and even as you go different directions, you maintain those connections. But as you go through the medical school and residency process, I think a lot of the relationships are just relationships of convenience for the most part. And they're not as long-lasting, and you don't have that feeling. And so that's really a tough part of our world as doctors that most people don't recognize. We have to go through. When you marry into that, you begin to recognize that whole process, and that's a bit of a difficult thing compared to your peers who went through college with you, who are not out doing that, and you're watching them do that, but you don't get to do that yet. It's really a little bit of a hardship. So I think the other element, you guys aren't there yet, but you will get there, I know, is when you finally get to become an attending physician and you finally start to make a decent amount of money, is sort of getting to choose where you want to live, where you want to work, and really having the freedom to sort of create that space that you want, that provides a safe haven, a respite from the hard work that both of you are going through. And I think the biggest mistake I see that people make in that process when they reach that stage of attending physicians is they go for the doctor's house at the beginning. And it's just not a wise move. Have you guys had conversations? You're an accountant, you're a planner, you're a thinker. I can tell you've already thought about real estate and stuff. Have you guys had conversations about that doctor's house thing at all, or how you've thought about how those things stack up? I know it's a few years out.
We've had these conversations. You can take it.
I feel like we have a plan of, we would like to stay within a modest standard of living for a while to increase savings, because the dollars that you save early in your career are the most valuable dollars that you'll ever make.
Okay.
And so because if you invest those dollars, you can multiply them to where they're 10 to 20 times more in 30 years, and there's a balance because you still want to enjoy life, but I think that it's important to know what brings you joy in life and know what you derive value from, and so it's kind of an individual decision. And so there's certain material things that to us we like and are willing to spend money on, and then other things that we don't care as much about. And so I think that's okay. We kind of have a plan of sort of what percentage of our income we'd be willing to put towards a house in the future, and so that's kind of dependent, and then also the amount of a down payment that we need to have towards that, and we don't ever want it to be more than a certain percentage of our net worth. And so all of those things, they either restrict you, or if you want something bigger or better, they motivate you to put yourself in a position to where you do get that nice house, but it's still within those restrictions that you set out for yourself. Maybe you increase your income, or you have a bigger down payment that decreases your payments on a house to where you can end up, there's all sorts of ways to do things. expect to start out modestly in our lives. We think that's important, the most important step to make.
Yeah, so. And I think planning is kind of a key, and just kind of staying disciplined to that plan. It doesn't have to be, hardcore, but just staying disciplined to the concept of living modestly and being excited about growth. Like, I think that if we came out and just bought, the biggest doctor house there was, at some point the joy in that's going to max out. Mm-hmm. And that happens in every career, every person. I mean, at some point the joy is going to max out. So I wouldn't want to do that first anyways, even if I had the opportunity to. It's for me, and even for him, I think it's all about seeing the process. Yes, medical school and residency is a process, and then attending, starting attending, but there's still life to live after that too. So, I think beyond medical school and residency, there's still phases in life beyond that you can continue to grow and change too. So
yeah, that's good. There's a lot of pro tips in there for you guys. If you're a medical student, resident, and early attending, the stuff that they just said are pretty advanced thinking, I think, overall, in terms of the decision tree of checking yourself a bit. Kind of what I heard you saying there, though, I believe, was you have an eye on your net worth in this whole process, right? You're trying to save as much as you can. Early on, you would try and pay off as much as your debt. I know from our prior conversation with John, you have some debt for our medical school, right? Mm-hmm. Do you have college debt still?
I do not.
Okay, so you're fortunate that way. So you're not paying down any of your educational loans yet. So when you start residency, are you going to hold on to those loans, or are you going to pay them off?
We want to pay them off as fast as possible.
Okay. Yep. So
they're definitely not low interest rate loans.
Okay.
So
you're gonna make that priority, so that when you get out of residency, you're hoping to be by then clear of all debt.
Mm-hmm. Unless you have a house that you're paying down still.
Okay,
but
so
which is good debt.
A lot of people view it as good debt.
So you consider that the good debt, and that's a question that I was getting ready to head towards. Is, do you consider a mortgage or a real estate debt that you're living in still a debt, or do you not consider it a debt? And kind of what's your two philosophies about that? Because sounds like you've really thought about these things.
Things that fall into the category of consumerism is bad debt. So taking out a loan for a car, credit card debt, student loans arguably, versus things that can be considered assets that you are, once it's paid off, it'll maintain its value or have grown in value, would be considered things that are good debt. And student loans can kind of fall into both, but interest rates are high enough that it's worth paying them down. A house would typically be considered good debt because you can eventually either have a paid off house that your income doesn't have to go towards anymore, or you can sell that house and then you get a nice chunk of cash it's like a savings account essentially. And so
you guys wouldn't consider yourself like a Dave Ramsey fan where you're going to buy your first house cash only?
Not necessarily. There's something about building equity in a house. Not just to buy it all straight out. I think that, ultimately, if you have the mindset of, if you're investing in yourself and your future, typically those items that you're investing in, if it is truly benefiting and investing in yourself or your family, it's going to be congruent with being good debt, such as student loans. Like that's okay because you're investing in yourself. It's an asset. In the end, you come out with a degree, you come out with a job. So that's kind of the way I see debt.
All right, so again, just one step further on this kind of, because I can tell you guys have thought this out, and I realize you're out of residency home, would not probably be your, quote, doctor's home. So you guys envision a staircase almost, like you get out of residency, you take your first job, you're going to buy a modest house that fits all those criteria you just talked about. Probably won't be your final house. You could envision yourself moving a couple times, maybe 3 times, till you reach that desired staircase where it's the affordable place where you want to be to have the house you want. Is that correct?
Definitely.
That's your plan?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. That's a great plan. A lot of people do that plan. once children come and things accumulate and things happen, it gets a little more tricky. And I think that gets more challenging, and our viewers will probably chime in on this and also recognize that the further or the older you get, I think the harder each move becomes, and the more you just have that sensation of wanting to set down roots in that sort of final destination, if you will. Although, studies show that 50% of doctors will move after their first job. And that's within 5 years of their first job. So very few of us end up staying in that first place that you land. And so even though we go through this 4-year medical school process, this 3 to 5 year residency process, and you like to think when I get done, I'm going to land in the place I'm going to be, and it'll be the place, more than half of us are going to move on.
More than half change jobs.
Yeah.
So there's even more than that probably who also just move houses. Like you
that's a good
you might
point.
even stay in the same place, but they move to a different house or something like that.
Okay,
So,
right.
You know what I mean? I just want to clarify that.
And in a large metro area, they might change jobs, but also not change houses. Okay,
Right.
so there's a lot of variability in that, but that really is it's an interesting subject. It's I really appreciate the two of you sort of giving us some of your insights about where you are in that journey and how that has really affected your life up to this point, and how you plan to not let it sort of negatively affect your life, but to really leverage in the right way. I know a lot of our viewers will really resonate with the first thing you said there, John, is, man, it's painful to give that rent money away every month, though, isn't it? I just did a little calculation, and basically between medical school and residency, if you rent, you're looking at having lost about $100,000 in that process. I did a calculation recently. I think that was based on about $1,200 per month rent. But it's tough to think about the ledger sheet going that direction, $100,000. But yet, at the end of the day, if you leveraged your money into the bank and didn't have enough for the down payment, and really didn't have enough income flow to pay down that, and then you take into account realtor fee, the other costs of maintaining a house, you're way past $100,000 in that equation if you chose to buy.
Yeah.
And so even though it's painful to let go of the $100,000, it could be a lot worse if you made some bad decisions in it.
Very true.
And I think people rarely are able to recoup that in that short time frame in most cases. So again, thank you all for being with us today in this episode, and to share your thoughts. We invite your comments, your feedback through the website, through the SpeakPipe, through the various avenues that we have at Doctor Incorporated. Share this episode with your friends and get their thoughts on it as well. We're working on trying to grow our audience a little bit right now, and would really appreciate your sharing these episodes with them so that we can get more people involved in our community talking about the issues that are important to doctors, especially employed physicians. Hope you have a great day.